Things are going to start happening to me now.
You've done all the reading. You're a scholar. You're a professor. You've done all the reading. You've done the intellectual heavy lifting.
More or less, eat shit and die.
You wouldn't know a fact if it begged you all night long.
Want to give the wrong impression because I am very high.
Ran up behind him with a hatchet. Smash, smash, smash.
Yeah. Care. I'm a libertarian. What I'm getting is,
Did you vote for Joe Jorgensen or Trump?
Who?
Joe Jorgensen. That was the perfect answer. Thank you. That was...
Libertarian Podcast Review is upon you. It is a Friday. It's the 20th of May. Time's just flying on by. I think it's episode 44 here. What are we going to talk about today? We got a few things. Saifedean Ammous lies blatantly. I'm sadly, I've got to talk about that little situation he was on with Human Action Podcast. So we're going to go talk about that. We're going to talk about Dave Smith, and he had Guy Swann, Clint Russell, Robbie Bernstein, Bear, about talking about economics. There were 2 episodes of that. He was also on Patrick Brady David. We'll play a few clips there. David Brady had Nick Rekieta on, not a podcast official. Mentioned Tyler, me, again, but with a twist. And then some listener watcher comments, perhaps. Saifedean, what did he do that's so evil? Well, I'm going to talk to you about it. I don't know that why he said what he did, and it seems innocuous to most people. But if you listen to podcasts and you hear someone speak, you might wonder where they're getting their data, what are they saying, and you believe them. And then when they say something so outrageous, you look into it and you go, "What? Do you trust them on anything else?" Maybe so, or maybe there's other economists out there I could just go to instead of this guy. Clown. I'm literally calling him a clown. He's awesome, and I'll talk about it, but he's a clown. So we'll talk about that. And I tweeted out him to get some verification here about some statements he had made, and crickets. I think I even have, and this is what I heard. Yeah, so nothing, which no big deal. I mean, you have to come at me, but if you're going to make statements out there to the world, maybe you can support them. Okay. So what else do we have here? I had Marc Clair, episodes 42 and 43, talked about the Mises Caucus stuff, what he did, and I reviewed his podcast. Then he came on and had a great time with him. So that was great. I enjoy everyone that's made the comments. We'll try to read some of those off here. I appreciate all the feedback and you guys actually paying attention to that one as well. Marco's great. I had a great time with him. He's funny. He's humorous. He gives playback and chit chat, and it was for me it was a dream come true in a sense of a fun podcast, having a guy on that I've always enjoyed. And this is part of the thing that you've got to realize. Even some people were talking about how he's much, more brutal kind of online than he is maybe on a podcast. And yeah, I'm that way too as well. But, you listen to it. And Pete, I've said that about Pete, and I don't think it's necessarily becoming, but, you listen to a podcast, you hear a lot of conversation, you almost get to know someone in a sense. And then you see the little tweet stuff that we all do. And for me, I just kind of dismiss it. But those kind of things can also get some rings raw, which brings me to, we're doing a Kill podcast episodes or Kill Tony knockoff that we have. This is the 25th coming up on Wednesday, the day before Reno starts, and everybody in the libertarian movement knows about that. And since that's the case, if you want to come in and talk and sign up for that, please do. We can talk about Reno. We can talk about Marc Clair. We can talk about anything you want. We can talk about the Jack Lloyd Pete debacle thing going on. I'm not going to really get into any of that, but some of you hate Andy, some of you hate me, some of you hate us both. If you want to come and talk to us about that, it's all open. Send me a Twitter DM, Tyler, Tyler Janke. We'll hook you up for that. Okay, so the Human Action Podcast with Jeff Deist. I'm going to do that the last. Okay, I'm going to hold your attention, hopefully, till the very end of this, where I'm going to go into and do a breakdown of Saifedean Ammous. I think he's Palestinian, I want to say. Kind of a breakdown of some things he said. And I don't know why, but I think I might know why. Before we get there, I think we will start out with a few quick clips of Dave Smith. He was on the Patrick David podcast. Larry Sharp, Spike Cohen, Jessica Vaughn, and I think let's run it. We're going to run everything like we normally do, 1.25. Maybe you don't like that, but it gets me through this so I can go out and do something else with my day. So take it away, Patrick. Why did you have these guys on the show, and who do you going to thank for it?
We have to thank somebody for today's podcast. I don't think with this individual, this would have never happened. I think, Spike, you know this individual very closely. On behalf of the entire PBD podcast and the crew here today, we'd like to thank Jo Jorgensen for creating this unification of everybody coming together. She had some nice things to say about you. And we talked a lot about libertarians. We talked foreign affairs, China, border, taxes.
Yes.
We had a lot to talk about that day with Jo. And I said, listen, I put a question on Twitter. Hey, I'd like to bring a panel of people. Everybody was saying, you got to have Dave Smith on, and I brought it up to Rogan. Rogan's like, this guy's an absolute stud. You've been on Rogan before. And Spike, you were the VP for the Libertarian presidential 2020, right?
2020
VP. Yeah, Larry, you're running for governor right now in New York.
Hold on. Did Joe Rogan not say good things about me?
Joe, I didn't ask him about you.
Oh, okay,
I actually heard you talking shit about you. I actually heard. Yeah.
God, you better do that live so I can get some votes.
Your stuff was like 3 or 4 years ago,
Yes,
right?
it was.
Yeah. But we were having dinner, and the interview with Jo Jorgensen came up because he voted for Joe, and then that's kind of how it led to all this other stuff. And you being a comedian, rock star, you explain complex things in a very good way. And then we have also Jessica Vaughn here with us. We've been communicating Bitcoin community, crypto community, libertarian community. So let's all come together and see if we can do this podcast. Appreciate you guys for coming out.
Yeah, man.
Thank you. Of course.
So can I start off with just a open question for all of you guys, and then you tell me where we're going with it. So here's where I stand and why I'm more and more curious with what's going on with the libertarian argument. So for me, I grew up in Iran, politically, mother side communist, father side, imperialism. He believed in the Shah and, what he was doing. And my mother was not. She was more about the Karl Marx and what a noble man and, Communist Manifesto, all this stuff. So I grew up thinking, rich people are greedy and poor people are lazy. That's pretty much where I was at, right? And
there we go. I think that's all that you need to see the interview. No, to check it out. But I'm going to play another clip here. But the point of that one was kind of to show why and how it came about that. We went over that whole Joe debacle in my mind, really what it was. And it was good to see that, one, they didn't even bring up the quote about Dave, but you think Patrick McDavid's going to risk his career in a sense of bringing a guy that advocates rape? No. So he either listened to Dave or he knew from Joe, like we all did. Not we all, because some of you actually were defending that she was batshit crazy. Okay, this next one is what's my heading on this one? Patrick, Joe didn't debate, and I think this is, once again, this isn't necessarily bashing Joe, but I think there's a big contrast you can see watching this one with all three of them. And for Jessica, even Jessica, I think could have done better than Joe. Anyway, take it.
Hustle. When you look at Lyndon Johnson back in the days when he ran for Congress, the guy was known as a BMF who was willing to come and sit down and tell you, I want your vote. And that takes a lot of work to do, right? Shaking hands, doing all that stuff. You were in it. You guys ran together, yourself, and I saw the bus. I saw all the stuff that was going on. What did you see? What do you think was the missed opportunity? And what was it like when you were talking to people to convert? Because the whole game is about converting. It's not to talk to people that agree.
Yes.
My biggest concern with Joe was when I spoke to her is, how come you haven't had many debates? She couldn't think about a debate. So who's pushing back? Who's challenging? Are there people being converted? I thought Milton did that. But what did you feel was the climate in 2020?
I'm glad you brought up the debate during the Joe interview, because, and I think there was also a big part of, there was a lack of messaging discipline when it came to, and this was something that I tried to do as much as I could, but I'm the VP candidate. It's not a 50-50 running mate situation. It's more like 95-5. So I did everything I could to talk about lockdowns and the mandates and everything else. That wasn't the main focus of the campaign, unfortunately. And by the time the shift happened in summer, where there was more focus on that, it was too late at that point. And at that point, a lot of the lockdowns were waning too. So it was no longer the big thing everyone was talking about. But I'm glad you brought up the debates, because the reason we didn't participate in any debates during the 2020 race was because the campaign decided not to. Obviously, we couldn't participate in the Republican and Democrat, the Commission on Presidential Debates debate, because that's a cartel and they keep everyone else out. But there were opportunities to participate in debates with other third-party candidates, and the campaign decided not to. Now, I don't know why that was. They said it was because, well, we don't want to be seen as being at the kids' table. 1%, 2%, 3%, 0.5%, we're at the kids' table, and we need to take our position that we're at now, stand on the kids' table, and try to use it as leverage to get up higher. That was a sort of microcosm of many problems in the campaign. We ran a really good campaign for a candidate who was already comfortably ahead by a couple of points, and didn't want to rock the boat too much. I think that first of all, just can give you an idea of what the process. And why is my camera going out here? Let's bring this in. Does that work? I don't know. You get an idea of the seriousness of the Libertarian Party, even amongst
the vice presidential candidate for the last time. Okay. And it was good to see that, this is kind of the whole idea of the Mises Caucus, in a sense, is trying to take this thing over because there's this lack of seriousness in this party. Okay. I know. And you guys are like, hey, you're playing a lot of clips of Dave stuff. Yeah, I am, because there was some really good things that happened with it this last week and last few weeks. So this one, though, Dave did a good thing. And I think, look, when one of the things Marc Clair was harping on was there's a lot of serious things going on in this world. Let's take those things at face value. Let's talk about those and stop, playing around with kind of the mealy mouth libertarian party stuff. Okay, I get it, and I think actually this is a kind of an outreach of this, which is Dave having these guys on. Let me see which one is the best here. Dave having these guys on, Guy Swann, bottom right, Clint Russell, and even Robbie Bernstein, talking about the serious stuff, which for me is in this sense is economics. Economics is everything really in the world. But let's talk about this one first. We're going to play a few clips here. This one is crypto liquidity. I'm going to play a clip of it real quick, and then they kind of recap, in a sense, in a better scheme on the next one. So we'll get into this as well. Let's go.
Opportunity, but I'm not like waiting to buy. I'm just stacking what I can. Like Bitcoin is, because when you have a deleveraging event, like Bitcoin is very liquid now. It's also something that a lot of people now that crypto is such a great like little microcosm of like all the shit that is wrong with finance. Like DeFi leveraged, I've leveraged a token to get another token that I can stake, that I can lock up into some DeFi contract so I can arbitrage this other thing and get this governance token, which gives me 10% rewards. Like, I mean, it's such a fucking shit show. And it's all built on air. And that's what we've seen in like the last little bit, like this week. Luna and UST, this attempt at an algorithmic stablecoin, which was by default, like which they explicitly, you knew that it wasn't backed. You knew that it was not actually fully collateralized. Like the thing was a Ponzi scheme from the very get-go. And they purchased like 50,000 Bitcoin or whatever to try to shore this thing up. And then subsequently, when the peg broke, and the way the like Luna algorithm works, so dumb. It's so dumb. The way the Luna algorithm works is it literally prints Luna to keep the peg. So they were literally trying to inflate the shitcoin out of their dollar depegging. And in the process, they tried to back it up with this like centralized entity.
He said pegging.
It's got like 50,000 or 60,000 Bitcoin. It's like billions of dollars in Bitcoin. And so they're dumping that on the market to buy their own shitcoin to try to keep it alive.
Okay, and I'm playing that there, so you probably heard some terms. Maybe it depends on how good you are with your Bitcoin or your trading and your understanding to some of these words: arbitrage, stacking, DeFi, this kind of thing. And I'm going to explain some of this. Now, I come from a world that I spent many years doing in trading, and I was part of the go-between between the market makers and the clients and the brokerage firm, and I did a lot of trade disputes. So I had to understand the inner workings of day trading in a sense, and the technical aspects of it. Okay. And I've got a bunch of licenses to back me up on that. At least I did at the time they lapsed. How, and by the way, I'm not great necessarily at, giving investment advice, but I could tell you the inner workings of how these processes work from the backside of the office in a sense. And so you heard that. And if you don't understand it, I'm going to explain it, because I think Guy Swann and Clint actually had talked about it with his dad when he was on an episode here before about margin, and Robbie actually points to it here. So let's make sure I'm on the right one. The next one is going to be at the 20. That was that one we just played. Okay, so this one, let's get this one up here. They go more into detail. They did a 2-part episode, right? So I think this is part 2, and they kind of get back into this thing of margin, liquidity. But Robbie asked the question, basically poses it like, look, I'll let him pose it, but it's basically Bitcoin's supposed to be inoculated from a lot of these problems that we have with the central banks, the Fed, Why is it crashing along with the regular market? Take it away.
Russia shit. Like, I mean, really, they genuinely believe that the election was stolen.
Question: have you seen 2,000 mules yet? I keep hearing about
this. This is a question about the 2,000 mules. Sorry. We'll get back to the next one in a second.
I have not. So this is the Dinesh D'Souza, his most recent documentary. I have not seen this yet. Have you guys? Have either you guys? What were your thoughts?
That's what I got.
I thought honestly, I don't trust Dinesh, unfortunately.
Yeah, me neither.
If the evidence that he presents is legitimate, I would say it's a smoking gun. I'd have to be proven that stuff's legitimate. So that's my first take on it.
I tend to agree. Dinesh D'Souza makes compelling documentaries, but he also will do these things where he's like, the greatest president ever was Abraham Lincoln. I'm like, like you pronounced worst wrong. But all right.
Well, and there's the other thing. The other thing that he really fucked up on is that, or I don't think he fucked up. I think it was an intentional oversight or leave on the cutting room floor. They keep talking about the different what's it called? Basically, the nonprofits that these mules were going back to. Like that, but he never says who they are. He never says who the nonprofits are. So what I concluded with that is that those nonprofits were probably bipartisan. You probably had mules on both sides of the aisle that were doing the same thing, and they don't
documentary.
And they don't want to bring that up because he is purely a Republican propagandist. And so that's my take on it.
I love that because I'm a little skeptical of what's his name too. What is his name? His name is, we already know, Dinesh D'Souza. There you go. Okay, so I skipped over that one, and we're going to go directly into this. Hopefully, got it right here. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to go into this next one here, which is, I pinned up the question for you about Robbie, about the liquidity and the crypto, security and all that. Back to the 2,000 mules, though. Clint and his ability to be a little skeptical and looking into these things, that's what you have to do. And that's what I did with this Saifedean Ammous guy. Because you're like, and we'll get to it, but lying about one thing, and you're like, it's so easy. If you just, look as an attorney, you're obligated to, as a matter of fact, if you use a case that, it has, you're quoting it and you're briefing it on there and it has a negative issue, you're basically required to point those out as well. So you don't just get to point out the good, you have to point out the bad, and then you got to make your arguments around it as well. And I appreciate what he did there because I don't know, Keith Knight did a breakdown of kind of what he thought about the 2,000 mules thing. I haven't watched it. It's probably something you should be concerned about, but I tend to think that there's a bit of a skew that probably happens with Dinesh that I'm probably not totally comfortable with. So we'll just leave it at that. Okay. This one, going back into the liquidity and why is Bitcoin crashing with the market? Take it away, Robbie.
For Guy to respond to. So before we go into this, I'm playing devil's advocate here. I'm not selling out of my crypto. I got my crypto. I love my crypto.
Fuck you, Robbie.
Before we go into this, I want to say, fuck you, man. All right, go ahead. What do you got?
No, I do think that we have a substantial issue. The first being that the story to Bitcoin is supposed to be, hey, if everything else is failing, this is your flight to safety. And we're learning, well, that's not a true story because it's a risk asset. And you got all the people that have been taking on leverage to be in the stock market are doing that with crypto as well. And so especially if there's yield available.
Why is Guy's camera always so jumpy? I don't know where he's at in the world. He probably is keeping that a secret. Maybe it's a place with second-rate internet.
And more secure assets, you might see people pulling out. That's problem one. Problem two is I do believe, and we talked about this a little bit just on direct messenger, but I do think this is going to open up the opportunity for your regulators that want to regulate crypto to step into the market and go, look, a stablecoin just failed. This is the danger that existed. On top of that, most of the actual liquidity in terms of transactions for crypto, I believe take place on Coinbase. That, not to anyone's surprise, we just discovered if they go bankrupt, you don't have your Bitcoin. Now, you're a person who said, hey, if it's not your keys or, you're not your wallet, it's not your crypto. And we all understand the problems with fractional reserve banking, which is what we're moving away from. And you can kind of understand, hey, if you're a website, you're probably engaging in fractional reserve banking with people's crypto. And I say that as a guy who's too lazy to make a wallet and I have all my money on Coinbase. But I hand it back to you to say that the developments of this past week, well, I'm not selling my Bitcoin and I'm not saying it can't rally, but I do think this has been this has been a bad news week for Bitcoin.
There's certainly an argument there. There's what we're looking at is like Bitcoin is being treated as a risk asset, and it's also liquid. So when like you're trying to shore up a leverage position, if you're trying to shore up, let's say you have a position in the stock market and you're holding on to Bitcoin, you can dump that quickly to shore up to make sure you don't get margin called on your stock position. So that absolutely happens over the short term, and that is not new. Again, like the March 2020 event, it dumped from like 7,000 to 2,000 something. Like it dumped below 3 in like a matter of hours. Like it was real serious. Then like the next month and a half or something, it climbed all the way back up to like 7,000 or 8,000. At the end of the day, the beauty of Bitcoin is that if you're holding Bitcoin, you still have the Bitcoin. You cannot be diluted of the Bitcoin, and it is scarce. It's scarce. It's going to keep working. And the best thing about it is the payment networks and the infrastructure that's growing in the background right now. Like there's basically a small portion of international payments that are happening because of the Lightning Network right now. that are actually being settled because of the liquidity in the Bitcoin network.
If you're the people using that, though, you got to be spooked like hell. Like Sri Lanka just lost like
they wouldn't even know. They wouldn't even know. They're trading dollars. They're sending dollars overseas, but the liquidity in Bitcoin is being used to buy Bitcoin on one end and sell it on the other end to move money overseas. And rather than paying like a 10% fee and waiting 3 days, they're getting it in a second and they're paying like a penny. Like
I thought the country took a giant hit today.
Wait, which country are we talking about?
Sri Lanka. Aren't they the one that are that have Bitcoin as the national currency? Do I have this wrong?
No, you're talking about El Salvador.
Oh, my bad. You know.
Okay, Robbie had a country wrong there, but I thought we'd talk about a few things here that Guy Swann had said and maybe explain them just a little bit. So in the stock market, and what he said about margin calls, completely correct. If you take a look back at my, I don't know which episode it was, probably 10-ish around there, maybe 5 to 10. Anyway, one of my first few episodes, I talked about the short sale squeeze that you had with AMC and all these other things. It was a big deal in the world and the stock market. Of course, we squeezed out a bunch of those people, and I talked about how that structure is actually done. What you're doing is you're leveraging stocks. And by the way, it's similar to Coinbase in a sense where if you leave your crypto with Coinbase, it's custodial. They actually are able to do it. It's called on the street, and they can trade those shares in or stock or crypto in with other people. You don't actually hold them; they're the custodian. But if you put them in a cold wallet, you are actually the one holding it. It's much like if you own a Disney and you want to have an actual stock certificate, and you hold it up and you have it in your hand. That's yours. You can then cash it in, even if it's got stock splits and stuff. Okay, so the idea is you own these shares or you own crypto in a sense, but we're talking about the stock market and it's crashing and how that's affecting that. You are owning stock, and what you then do is you use equity in that position. And as soon as you buy it, even if it doesn't go up, you still have some equity that the stock brokers are indicating. So these certain stocks, we're going to let go to a certain position. You can let it go down to 25-30% of its values that you have to at least hold. So then you're able to leverage the equity in there to buy more shares of something else. So then you suddenly have more buying power. So you're doing this on margin, but you're getting charged interest. If those stocks start to fall and they say, hey, what they're doing is they're actually having shares and they're allowing someone else to borrow them, as an example, or the margin department in the brokerage firm says, hey, you need to actually, we're up in these stocks falling and the market's falling. And we actually need you to bring in more money so that your equity is higher, or you're going to sell the shares, or we're going to sell them for you. And they will do it, boom. And it just takes, and they sell them for you without your approval. Now, some stocks have a higher percentage that you have 50, 70% or so, and then better, more quality stocks that there aren't much volatility, they let to go to a lower percentage. The point is the stock market is falling down. It's crashing. You have all these people that have their accounts on margin and they're over leveraged in a sense. And then they need money to bring in. They don't want to lose their positions. So they end up liquidating something, which in this point, as guys actually accurately stated here, the liquidity ability of the crypto. You sell it, you pay off your margin debt, or you at least add to it, and you're able to hold your position, and hopefully the market goes up. And then Robbie had mentioned about regulating when shit goes wrong like this. Yes, the stock market crash in 1929 really emphasized that. I think they had margin percentages down to 5% at that point. So you were leveraging upon leveraging upon leveraging, exactly what he was talking about with some of the crypto crap that's going on. And then the 1933 Securities Act in 1933 really shored up a lot of this behavior and ill will that they had in the market. And you know what? For better or for worse, that's where we're at now. We don't obviously want those kind of things, especially with the crypto, any kind of ability to come into the market and do that. If you have questions about how all this stuff works, take a look back at my one episode. Maybe I'll post it in here, talking a little bit, excuse me, more detail about the trading market. But like I said, I'm not great about, I do find investing myself. But as far as like picking stocks and all these things, I was a day trader. I understand the inner workings of how the market goes. And then things change for day traders. Cash accounts, all different kind of how much you can actually trade on a day. A lot of weird things went on in the 2000s, in the early 2000s, and I was there for it. Okay, Let's go to the next one. Dave Smith has been on this is kind of like a Dave Smith episode, I guess. And Dave Smith was on Ari Shafir. I just thought this was an interesting part because it's a 4.5, almost 5-hour episode that he has here. But this one he talks, and he's talked about this several times. And I wish we would know. I mean, maybe do this yourself. I've never double checked Dave on this. Maybe I should, like I did Saifedean Ammous. But Dave talks about kind of the wokeness in the banks. Let's take it away, Dave.
You can like do these nexus searches where you search for just terms and how often they're used in like major media publications.
Yeah.
You know, in the New York Times and the Washington Post, on CNN, things like this. And if you go search the term like racism or social justice or transphobia or gender fluidity or any of these terms, right? I mean, you go look at the charts. It's like in 2000, like 8, they're like never said. And then in 2010, they just shoot up.
Really?
And then 2010, 2011, 2012, 2013, they just like, it's like this wokeism thing. It always existed. It was like in the universities, there was critical race theory and these things, but it got completely embraced by every major corporation, every mainstream corporate news outlet, by the CIA and the NSA. Well, this is the end. To fucking create, to take that, we are the 99%. And flip it on its head. You're like, no, you're not the 99%. You're the racist versus the non-racist. You're the trans versus the cis. You're the black versus the white. You're the gay versus the straight.
Don't team up against the rich.
Exactly. And look, now you see it. It's like right in front of your face, dude. You see it now.
Wow.
You'll be.
By the way, it should be versus. I'm sure he's heard this before. It always bothers me. I'm willing to overlook it though, Dave. Keep on.
People really do care.
The Gay Pride Parade will have a fucking Bank of America float.
They don't give a shit. The Bud Light,
the
Bud Light can. The Bud Light Rainbow can. The Bud Light Rainbow can.
Listen, it was the perfect fucking game. So this is what they did. They bought off the left, right? Who was their biggest like threat. They bought off the left by saying, look, how about this? We'll fucking send all of our white and Jewish executives to diversity training, and we'll fucking put a float in the Gay Pride Parade, and we'll speak all of your woke language. And now you're not really focused on the banks anymore, are you? No, you're talking about trans bathrooms, right?
Yeah.
And hey, guess who's your big enemy? Your big enemy is no, not JP Morgan Chase, right wingers. Wow. That's who you got to go fucking get.
Meet some guy.
Yeah,
you're never gonna meet him.
Whatever. I don't know. They don't have the same stance as you.
There's a statue in some city you've never heard of until now.
And then they convinced right wingers that
the left.
They're the left. You know, that like that's the left. What the left is not the ones who are going, hey, it's so unfair that fucking, you know, you don't have healthcare and we're bailing out bankers. They're the ones who want your boy to be a girl.
Right.
You know, and like and it just like it creates this thing where and look, where's all these big banks right there? Their fucking profits are still raking in. Where's all that energy?
And
it's completely gone. It was the most effective fucking thing ever to completely look, man, the left went from in the last 20 years protesting like the war in Iraq and the banker bailouts, like real shit.
Now we're
they used
for
to
the war in
protest.
Ukraine.
And now they're just fucking supporting wars, have nothing to say about the fucking banks. And it's like,
it's amazing because they
took
the
off. Now, by the way, I
go,
should say the good leftists still care about all that shit, but it's just like they got drowned out.
I love this State of the Union with Dave and with Ari. Ari seems to be very receptive to this. I don't know what his actual feelings are, but that's what it is. Okay, David Brady, this little shit got Nick Rekeita on here. I did ask a question, and David actually posed it to him, which is, are you actually a practicing attorney? I mean, you're online all day. You're streaming more than a teenage boy or one of these ethot chicks. And Nick basically said he's not taking on clients. He's having too much fun and enjoying. And if I could just sit here and talk all day like this and make the ridiculous hourly wage I do as an attorney, I would just do that as well. But I thought this was actually, and it's a very good interview. David has been creeping up as far as his one day, and I know it's going to happen before me, he's going to get Dave Smith either on his show or he's going to be on Dave's show, and that's going to crush my spirit, but I'm going to be super happy for him. He was on with Reed Coverdale, still haven't had me, but I thought that was really good. This show, by the way, a lot of this thing is not so much about trying to promote me in a sense. It's about promoting shows. Okay. So I love podcasts and I love listening to all these things. So it's about promoting these things, getting you into a new, one I featured a few weeks ago was the Unfit Statesman, Zach Brown. And I can't stop. It's one of my favorite ones coming out because he's so effing funny. So, that's what happens. Okay. Let's take a look here. I thought this was a funny exchange with Nick Rekeita and some good insight. He's a libertarian.
Get out of the military, from those Raytheon and Boeing money, and they get sent to the police departments. And is that really what a police force should look like?
It's an interesting question because SWAT teams are cool, right? We all like guns. We all like cool things painted black that are sweet and big and loud. And And it's always fun in entertainment to watch guys kick a door down and run in with shotguns and take care of a situation. High adrenaline, high impact. There are probably some police officers who are specifically attracted to that. But in general, no, I don't think it's the right thing for most police departments to have. But at the same time, we run into after the Dante Wright shooting, you've got big mobs of people. You've got big mobs of people with bricks, with glass bottles. You've got them going through neighborhoods. You've got them potentially intimidating people. What do we use to disperse those crowds? And so I think the police militarization has kind of led the fray, and the mobs are reacting in kind and escalating in their capacity for destruction and violence. But again, for the average everyday sort of police situations, and I think one of the big areas that's becoming more and more of a problem is these heightened responses to calls that are not giant mobs of people, right? Like you get a call to domestic issue, or we see swattings in the news, things like that, and police are responding with this heavy hand, very aggressively to these situations. I think we might need a little bit more caution. Out here in my town, we don't have a SWAT team, which is, I think, a big benefit especially for a rural town. So they don't approach things so hastily, right? I have been a victim of swatting. The police do not kick my door down. They don't do anything like that. And that's a blessing. In other metro areas, you will see them, first call out to a house from some anonymous number, so-and-so's killing someone. And they will kick a door down. They will put guns to people's heads. It's very terrifying and ripe for abuse.
Swatting.
I'm on the show.
Oh, I thought you were being swatted there, and I was like, that is perfect timing, man.
Can I take a very, very brief break?
No, feel free to.
Okay, I'll be right back.
All right, cool. All right. That is an interesting image. All right, well, guys, I'll fill in this little thing to kind of let you guys know about what's coming up in the future. In the future, I believe next week, this Sunday, I'm interviewing Alex Stein. That'll be coming out the next Sunday.
Damn,
Alex Stein, he's coming on.
Alex
Maybe
Stein
we'll get
coming
him
on
rapping
too?
about Putin again. We'll also have in the future, I know I talked to Viva Fry. Viva Fry,
Viva
love
Fry.
the guy. I've been watching him since 2017. Hopefully, he should be getting back to me, and we should be recording.
I'm not
something
even
with
trying
Viva
to
Fry
get
in
these
the future
people.
for a
Maybe
Sunday
that's the
special, which should
problem.
be great.
I got Marc
this summer,
Clair.
I will
Did you
be
get Marc Clair,
I'll be off
David
in the
Brady?
woods, and I'm just filling people in real quick on some stuff while you took a break there.
No worries.
Yeah, I'm just letting them know I'll be gone for the summer, so I'm recording some episodes. They'll come out during the summer. So if you see unupdated Patreon stuff in the past, that's because I haven't recorded it yet. All right, Nick, we can get back into things. Just let people know.
Yeah. Sorry, I had a literal officer in my house who was not related to swatting at all. But I was like, "Hey, man, I'm just talking about police violence."
Oh man, that is such weird timing.
He's a good dude.
Why is Nick? Why is a police officer randomly in your house? I mean, talking about your wife. What's going on there? What the hell? Great interview, David Brady. Congratulations once again. Check that out on David Brady's Road to Providence. He also has a Patreon. Check that out as well. He does a good thing. He does a Sunday interview. He releases it early. I wanted it early. I actually wanted to ask a question, so I paid $2. Maybe I'll cancel that. I don't know. Speaking of Patreon, before we get to the human action Saifedean Ammous lie, and I'm going to keep saying that because lies are specific. There's, that's what we have slander and defamation issues about, right? Libel and slander is people say things, and there's a reason why they do. And now, do you just say it's sloppy research? Perhaps, but if he's going to research, I'd prefer to actually, since he writes books about pretty high level economic stuff, that he's actually just lazy in the one aspect rather than intentionally lying, because then what do you say about all this other stuff? Okay, before we get there though, not a podcast official. I did an episode and reviewed their whole podcast, died laughing during the review. Some of these gentlemen had blocked me. Bert saved me from the grasp and brought me back in there. But when I did, and by the way, it's a long story. I did multiple things at once, and I mentioned, honorable mentions is actually what I said, not a podcast official. That's how they go. And Slurp Gang, when I really reviewed Tower Gang. Okay. I didn't know that there was so much hatred within all the parties, and half of the Slurp Gang blocked me on Twitter. Half of almost all in the entire not a podcast official blocked me as well. I'm like, what the heck? Then I went on Josh Smith's show. Bert ended up unblocking me and followed me. That was great. I bought a t-shirt from him actually. You'll see that in the closing. I've actually. And then Bert and then Steppy followed me from Not a Podcast, and I was actually a member of their Patreon. And I was great, and I didn't think they really cared. But then there was this issue with Pete and some other things, and somehow I got thrown into the mix here. And El Popo, which he had followed me as well until he got. This is the problem when you have people that get banned off of the internet and they come back with a new one. They follow you, and then they come back and they have time for you. Like, hey, what about me? So El Popo comes back to the fray after he had lost an account. Now he's ban evading or something like that. And he did not follow me back. And then he blocked me. And I'm like, hey, if you're blocking, and it was just, I did post his own balls on the timeline because he was being too serious about Pete. And then he blocked me. And I'm like, you know what? If you're going to block me, I'm not even going to, I'm not going to follow you, pay for your Patreon. Why would I do that? So I stopped the Patreon. And then I was like, been a while, and someone mentioned the group chat about them. And I'm like, yeah, it's been a while. So I went back to the Patreon. And the first one I listened to, I mentioned. Okay. Oh, it also reminded me, Lee Enfield. He was one that had blocked me. And then he lost his account. This is another good thing about losing your account, right? The bad part is, if they were following you, they may not follow you again. But Lee had me blocked. He lost his account, came back with a new one, and I saw the new one, and he didn't have me blocked, so I followed him. And I'm going to risk it here because I'm going to actually play a small portion of the Patreon show, which is only for members. But good Lord, you're talking about me, and I know you guys are probably more right wingers, so I will. I'm not. I don't believe in all that stuff. So. I don't believe in IP. So I'm going to play a section here. And as I was followed Lee, he got a notification of it. And by the way, this is a fucking hilarious episode too. So, and if you guys need, I don't know if you're listening to this at all, Bert or any of those guys, but if you need help, legal issues with dog fighting, I am your guy.
Say dog fighting. We're not dog fighting. We're just dog jitsu enthusiasts.
Dog whistling.
Dog whistling. Yeah. Yeah.
Dude, that guy, the podcast review guy, just added me again.
Okay.
What's this consensus on this guy? I had him blocked in my last
account.
Him.
Tyler Janke. He will listen to this.
Nice guy.
So he's a good guy.
He will
and
listen
I love
to it.
myself and my family. And
you won't listen to it. He unsubscribed from the Patreon.
Oh, did he?
Okay, let's go.
Yeah, he did.
Huh.
No, he's legitimately a good guy. Back to
Although I was going to make this a public episode.
Yeah. Good dude, back hard. We can ask him what he thinks about dogfighting. He's a lawyer too, so he actually might have some advice here.
I do.
Right. Yeah, maybe. I mean, on one hand, he reviews podcasts for a living.
Not for a living. Wait, let's go back to that. Let's repeat that.
We can ask him what he thinks about dogfighting. He's a lawyer too, so he actually might have some advice here.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, on one hand, he reviews podcasts for a living, so I have to believe that he would be okay with dog fighting from an ethical standpoint.
I want to be the guy who does commentary for dog fights.
That would be.
Okay, and then they go on. And by the way, it's it's just a hilarious episode. As always, once again, guys, I'm back. I paid the Patreon. You mentioned me again. Lee, you can follow me. I have no ill will. I think you guys are one of the better shows out there. Okay. Even though I couldn't find you and it took me a while, even though I subscribed to you on Spotify, it took me a while to still find you. That was Bert's problem. Thanks, Bert, for the kind words. I didn't get an immediate block from Lee. I appreciate that. Yes, I did drop off the Patreon. I explained why. I hope we're all good now. Right. I hope we're all good. I'm giving you guys money again. So we're fine. I don't review podcasts for a living. If you think this wonderful abode that the barn door behind me is because I do podcasts, you are sorely mistaken. I'm no Nick Rekeita, dear Lord. Okay, but I am one that doesn't like lies. So let's play this episode. This was so I'm gonna Saifedean Ammous, friend of mine a few years ago, lefty. We were talking about Bitcoin, and he's like, "Oh, I'm actually reading this book about Bitcoin." And I said, "Oh, which one?" And he said, "Bitcoin Standard." And he sent me it, and I looked him up, and then I looked up Saifedean, and I'm like, oh my God, he's been in front of Mises. He's with Jeff Dice. He's this guy. He's my guy in a sense. I hadn't read the book, but I'm like, sweet, my friend is getting economic and Bitcoin advice from someone in the Mises sphere, and I thought that was awesome. And my friend was okay with the book. He definitely, he invests in Bitcoin and does the stuff, so it's fine. So we're going to play this clip. So I was excited to actually see Saifedean on the Mises Human Action podcast. And at the same time, he was also on Lex Friedman. And so I was like, cool, this is going to be great. And then I'm listening to this, and I did finish this episode, but I don't know how you listen to podcasts or things. Do you just listen and you take, if you like the person, you just take in everything they say? And I like this guy. And then he says something, and I immediately know he's not telling the truth about this. And then you got to wonder, why is he saying this? What about him? So I did a kind of a deep dive on this, and we will take a look. So let's first play this clip by Saifedean. It's about the 30-minute mark in the show. Like I said, I do love Jeff Dice. I love Bob Murphy, who was also on the thing. But this episode was a little frustrating too, because they just kind of let him talk. And it was kind of like a TED Talk in a sense. And I liked an interview more. And then after I heard this, I was just, this guy's a little insufferable. Let's go to the show.
The wind in the sail of these insane people. And I think the same thing applies for...
Okay, so he's talking about insane people of pushing woke stuff, pushing economic illiteracy, and just the left in general. Okay, so then he's going to use an example.
There's religious cults in the U.S. that believe that eating meat is bad, and it's like the Seventh-day Adventists. They had this woman, Leanna Cooper, I think her name was, in the late 19th century, and she saw visions where again, Earth is the Garden of Eden, and the only thing preventing us from enjoying the Garden of Eden is that we're eating meat, and that we should all become vegans in order to save the planet and in order to save ourselves. Crazy people believe all kinds of crazy things.
Okay, so we will. That's what it was. So immediately, I'm like, oh well. First of all, let's take a few things here. And maybe you don't know much about religion. I do. I did a breakdown actually. Bill Maher, who had talked about the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and Dave Smith had played a clip of it, and I had to kind of correct on that as well. Why? Because that's what I do. So I heard this, and I'm like, first thing, we've probably all heard of Ben Carson. Remember the Seventh-day Adventist Church? Maybe you don't like these people, but it's not a cult church, okay? So his just declarative statement out there, giving no reason as to why, that's a little disturbing. Heidi Cruz, Ted Cruz's wife, was a classmate of mine. Well, she was a year behind me, but we went to the same high school, good friends. She's a Seventh-day Adventist. Yes, I am, or was, or I am. I guess I still am. So I'm well aware of this church and this understanding. So first thing I thought of was like, well, one, it's not a cult, but two, Lena Cooper, who I'm well versed on this church stuff, and I have no clue as to who she is. So I thought I would check it out, and she was a legit person. Now you have to understand. I don't know if you've ever seen the Road to Wellville. It's a movie. I'm trying to remember all the people in it, but the point of it is, Dr. Kellogg, you probably heard of Kellogg's Cornflakes. This is this guy back in the 1800s. He develops this place out in Battle Creek, Michigan, and it's a wellness place, and he's big into health, okay? And he has some weird ideas, but he also has some good ideas, okay? Dr. Kellogg, health, and we've heard about this. We understand who he is. So I looked it up. Lena Cooper ends up going to this Battle Creek place, the sanitarium out there, and she ends up working for him, and she lives with his family, and she's part of it. Now, what you have to understand is, looking through her, you're like, okay, well, maybe she's a crackpot. One, he's confusing a few people. One is, first of all, is a church a cult? I don't believe so. It's an offshoot of the Baptist religion. It's pretty mainstream. And then he also said the thing there that they have a lot of power in like the 70s, that they were. Did I finish that? Maybe we didn't finish the whole clip. Let's go back to it.
But why is this becoming government policy? Why do the Seventh-day Adventists become so influential? Because it fits in with the message that the government needed to communicate in the 1970s, which is meat is bad for you. Eat our industrial waste instead, because the industrial waste is cheaper.
Okay, I don't disagree with some of the ideas of like the food is waste, and it's industrial waste, and it's cheaper, and it's gross, and da-da-da. Yeah, that's not a problem. And I do agree that if you look at this church in general, that some of what's come out of there, some of the ideas and products that have been instituted from the vegetarian side, until lately. It's a lot of the soy stuff is gross and it's probably not super healthy. However, let's take a step back. Who's this Lena Cooper? So who's Dr. Kellogg? First of all, she never had visions. That was someone else in the church called Ellen G. White. Okay, there was like a prophet type of person, and she's the one that got the kind of the church started. It started in 1844. Maybe you're not interested in this, but I'm telling you because there's a reason. You have to ask yourself, why is he saying something so ridiculous and so easily checked? I mean, it's not super long ago, but he says a few things there. One is, it reminds me of people who you've seen Tucker Carlson, a few of these others say things such as, if it wasn't for the libertarians, we'd have X, Y, and Z, in the government and economics. And you're like, do you think the libertarians are controlling things? You think the Seventh-day Adventist Church is so powerful? I don't think we've talked about that. So you have Dr. Kellogg, this Ellen G. White. She did have visions, okay, or claimed to have had them. She has one when she's, I don't remember what the age it is, that you should have, that the church should have more of a health message. Okay, I couldn't find anything that talked about the Garden of Eden, and therefore you should, since you had, have a vegetarian diet because the Garden of Eden. No, but she said, hey, you should take care of your body more. Now remember, this is the 1800s. It's like 1845, 1846, somewhere in that area. Things were different. You didn't have refrigerators. You had a salt block, a box instead of an ice box. I mean, things you couldn't necessarily store and keep meat. So there was different ideas. This came about as a health message from this church. And you can look this up, and there's very distinct things about the church, as an example, doesn't have a tenet that you must be involved in vegetarianism to be, we'll just say SDA, Seventh-day Adventist. You don't have to have that as part of that church. It's not like you must, there's tenets, like 20-some tenets that you should probably follow, and they can excommunicate you if you don't believe in those. Vegetarianism is not one of them. Matter of fact, there's many examples of the same person going to different countries, Australia for one, and someone saying, hang on. And one of the people saying, "Oh, I'm having a hard time health-wise, with the vegetarian diet." And she's like, "Well, yeah, if you only have shellfish available, don't kill yourself trying to eat stupid plants." That makes sense. The point is, it was about a health message. It wasn't part of the church's teachings for you to be a vegetarian. Okay, this Lena Cooper, she goes to this sanitarium. And she starts working there for this Dr. Kellogg. Dr. Kellogg, about halfway through, in the first 4 years she's there, he gets excommunicated, kicked out of the church. Why? He starts having some absurd, some weird theories about race. Okay, he believes in total segregation, even though I think he had like 40-some foster kids, some who were black and different ethnicities, but he did think it was best not to mix them. So the church is like, you're out of here, and they didn't have anything to do with him. This Lena Cooper, though, continues to work for him. So you've got a separation between the church, Dr. Kellogg, but Lena Cooper stays with him, okay? She then ends up going and getting her degree. I think she gets her master's degree. She ends up starting, and we can actually I could probably share this screen here about a few little things about her and her life. And this is a whole biography about her. I don't even know if you can actually see this or not. But the important parts here talks about she becomes the director of some sort of health organization. She's a dietitian. So she's not a Garden of Eden dietitian. She's a dietitian. So for whatever her beliefs are, she believes that this is the thing. So she's named dean of the School of Home Economics at the Battle Creek Sanitarium in 1916. His indication was the 70s, remember? So okay, so we're just going to go away from that. I did write up some questions here, and we'll just kind of walk through them. And I also found, reading through her thing here, they said, was there any ever proof that she was a Seventh-day Adventist? And they said no. Matter of fact, when she died, she actually was of some other different denomination. There was another question here that it asked. It says, okay, having no evidence, she was, although several of her brothers were of this church, she died a member of the First Congregational Church in Battle Creek. During what years was Lena F. Cooper a vegetarian? Now remember, he said vegan, and there's a difference between vegan and vegetarian. She was probably a vegetarian from 1898 until at least 1926, and again from 52 to 54. and possibly until her death in 1961. Okay. She did run some organ association, but she was not part of the government pushing any of these kind of things. Okay. So you have Dr. Kellogg, who gets excommunicated. She kind of goes with him. She's in that thing. The church itself, do they lobby Congress for these things? No, they don't. Matter of fact, the church is, and I've been kind of involved in some of this, which is writing amicus briefs for several Supreme Court decisions. Way back, there's multiple employment cases. They're really big on civil liberties and government and out of your life. As an example, they wrote an amicus brief for the Obergefell decision, which was the gay marriage, which very narrowly specific about not taking a position whether gay marriage is, right or not, but that the churches should have freedom to make these decisions themselves. And that's always been my concern too. Let's not even have gay marriage. Let's not even have any marriage involved by sanctioning by the state. Because then what you do is if you have a church that does or doesn't want it, and whatever, let's say that the state says you can't do it and the church wants to do it. Now they're violating that. So you've got all kinds of problems here, and you shouldn't have the church. They should be able to do what they want. Okay. So there's those kind of things, and then there's employment about having your Sabbath, so to speak. So the point is, the church has been long involved in civil liberties, about religious rights, your First Amendment, and being able to express yourself in a free fashion. They're not. I couldn't find any evidence of lobbying Congress for vegetarianism. The only thing I could find was that the church is possibly involved in being they're very big into hospitals. So if you've heard of Adventist Health as an example, Loma Linda University is big time, worldly renowned. They did baboon hearts and other things. So the church has a big involvement in health care. And then obviously if they're pushing vegetarianism throughout that as a health message, as an example, you're going to see some sort of influence around the world. None of it's Congress made it. So I'm going to play this clip one more time. And yes, so it might just be a little bit of a personal issue as to why is he even saying these kind of things. But I think I have an answer for that as well.
That's what has, in my mind, been the wind in the sail of these insane people. And I think the same thing applies for, there's religious cults in the U.S. that believe that eating meat is bad. And it's like the Seventh-day Adventists. They had this woman, Leanna Cooper, I think her name was, in the late 19th century. And she saw visions where again, Earth is the Garden of Eden, and the only thing preventing us from enjoying the Garden of Eden is that we're eating meat, and that we should all become vegans in order to save the planet and in order to save ourselves. Crazy people believe all kinds of crazy things at all times, but why is this becoming government policy? Why do the Seventh-day Adventists become so influential? Because it fits in with the message that the government needed to communicate in the 1970s, which is meat is bad for you. Eat our industrial waste instead, because the industrial waste is cheaper.
All right. So looking to why is he making this, I thought maybe it's a religious thing. Maybe he has a problem with other religions. So I started going in there, and the first thing you find out with this is he's a big carnivore. And then I found a website that was, and there was an interview with him about being a carnivore. Then I found a website. It's kind of along the carnivore diet, and it was very pointed towards the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and a lot of the same arguments they were making, which, by the way, some are very crazy, and you should take note of this, and I'm not a vegetarian myself, which is Dr. Kellogg had ideas of giving a diet that would reduce someone's sexual desire, giving you soy boy type of stuff, right? So feeding you a bunch of these kind of things, and that was part of it. So this then takes on, and it says, and it's such disingenuous, which is someone in 1840s had an idea, right? And therefore everything in 2022, holy shit, we're almost a few hundred years of the way from this, that they are responsible, and that they're a cult for someone that was excommunicated for the church for what his beliefs were. Dude is a steak guy. That's great. Right? He looks like he couldn't beat up anybody, but you like steak, that's fine. And then you want to disparage other people. It's bizarre to me that you would take this on. He didn't respond to me, but that's what it is. I said, hey, What proof do you have that this Lena Cooper is part of the Seventh Adventist Church? What proof do you have that the Seventh Adventist Church, espoused these views, that they lobbied Congress, that they were powerful on this? He didn't have any. He didn't respond to me. Big deal. Did I end up listening to Lex Fridman? And maybe you did and you enjoyed it. Maybe he's great on Bitcoin. I'll tell you what, there's a lot of other people out there that are great on these same subjects. And maybe they aren't making up stuff because they're tied to a carnivore diet. This is what's crazy about a lot of this stuff. You're going to take on and you're going to make up stuff and you're going to lie about something super innocuous. No one gives a shit about this church. Well, I mean, people, obviously I'm doing a podcast, so I guess I care about it, but I don't really care so much that you don't like them or that what, but you're going to have to just make stuff up. What is the point of that? Right. And you're kind of weird enough into your own carnivore diet that you have to do this, because your example was great, except for all the facts were wrong. So what else have you got wrong? All right. So I don't feel safe, Adine, around this guy. That's about all I have there. Okay. Let's make sure I have this one. Who is Dr. Kellogg? We took care of that. Why is the church pushing vegetarianism? I think I talked about that. What kind of power does this church have? They have zero. And I was very disappointed in this church during the COVID stuff. There was a few of them that really took it on, but they used to be strong into civil liberty stuff, and they haven't. So, but they're definitely not a cult. Cult's very specific. There's reasons. Matter of fact, I'm gonna maybe cause some problems, but it goes back to what I said earlier about pointing out stuff that may be against you as well. You've heard of Waco. Well, they were an offshoot of the Seventh Adventist Church. So when this whole Waco issue happened, the church kind of got under some cloud of, derision from this, but there's a definite split. And why there's splits is because you're doing things that the church may not believe that are credible, that you're a little crazy. And some of these were the teachings of Koresh, right? And his party. So you're not going to be part of us. We're kicking you out, much like Dr. Kellogg. You're kicking you out. So if you wanted to say the Dr. Kellogg stuff, because you're going to mix in his passions and his teachings, but then you're going to tie it into a group that said, we don't want anything more to do with you. I mean, it's just as disingenuous as talking about the Buffalo shooters and some of these other ones. Why did Saifedean make these comments? I don't know. You're going to have to ask him, which I did. And what was his answer? His answer was crickets. Okay, that's all we got. Not a podcast. Check that out. It's one of the greatest out there for not being a podcast. It can be found on all your podcast catchers, but make sure it can't actually. But actually go to Patreon and you can join it up there. Check my episodes back with Marc Clair. Those were great. Once again, I appreciate him coming on. He's going to be featuring that episode actually on Lions of Liberty. So I'm pretty happy about that. I really enjoyed it. Kill Podcast coming up next week. I want all of you to make a stand. Come join us. Come join us for that. It'd be Andy and I. It'd probably be in this exact same room, the barn door behind me, that I got from all my proceeds from podcasts. I made $0 ever on podcasts, and I had a cycling podcast with pretty big audience. I had that 300 and some episodes. Never monetize it. I don't give a shit. I just lose money. I make money other ways. Later.
Okay, I'm leaving now. Bye, guys.
But she's back.
And now.
Chick-fil-A is completely overrated. It's not that good. I prefer Zaxby's. I prefer Popeyes.
Takes a tough man to make a tender forecast, Nick. I guess that's me. Keep fucking that chicken.
Should I vote for Dick Cheney on the Libertarian Party? Do I have an obligation to vote for Dick Cheney?
I would say so.
Yes.
Well, did it work for those people?
No, it never does. I mean, these people somehow delude themselves into thinking it might, but it might work for us.
That one dude was like, not a podcast. I can't find it anywhere. And they don't have video.
Oh, yeah, Peter Janke. Yeah.
Yeah, I blocked him.
I'll do it. If he unblocks me, I'll...
He'll buy your shirt if you unblock him, Bert.
He's a wigger.
Yeah, nothing cooler than a 49-year-old wigger.
I just started
live streaming. Cut me some slack. I'm pretty high tech for a boomer. But
For
anyways,
a boomer.